'cause I see the born of no return. Sister, hey now, can't you see we're rushing for the air? I see the point of no return. Now see the point of no return. It's just ahead.
Well, good evening. I'm Gary Hendershot, and I am once again barking at the moon, as if anybody really listened. It's October 14th, 2013. And for those of you who didn't know why all the banks were closed today, because we're celebrating Christopher Columbus Day. Yeah, how about that? Now, most normal people had to carry on life as usual. I mean, what the heck? The federal government was shut down anyway, right? So, the fact that today was a holiday for most government workers probably didn't even sink in. But yeah, a lot of the country today was celebrating a holiday for Christopher Columbus. Some Americans were less than amused. It is kind of interesting, though, that things have changed a lot over the years. For the longest time, it was just assumed that, Christopher Columbus discovered the fact that the earth was round and that there was this thing called America on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Well, maybe. The fact of the matter is the ancient Greeks, as early as 900 years BC, depicted the earth as a globe. They didn't really have the scale right. They weren't quite on target with the topography, and they only knew about the lands that they knew about, but they were pretty sharp about understanding that the world was indeed round. 500 years after Homer, the shape of the earth hadn't really changed that much. A little bit, they knew a little bit more about Asia. They kind of knew there was this thing called Africa that was down below Libya and Egypt. They weren't really sure what it was all about, but they knew it was there. And, the shape of the earth changed just a little bit. About the time you get to 200 years BC, a clearer picture of the old world starts to come into focus. People knew about India. They knew about China. Much of Africa had been explored by one group or another. And, the old world was pretty much known. Kinda. Well, along about 1500 A.D., a guy by the name of Toscanelli, an Italian fella, drew up a map supposedly based on some ancient maps that he'd had an opportunity to take a look at from Arabia, and proposed that the Atlantic Ocean was not that big, and that if you sailed to the west from Europe, you would eventually run into China and India. And of course, there was a very lucrative market for products from that part of the world, and at that time, Certain products produced in Europe were attractive to the Far East. So the idea of being able to travel by sea to Asia to conduct trade was very attractive to the monarchies of Europe. They wanted those luxury goods, and the idea of having to pay the vigorish to the Afghans and the Turks and the Khazars to, get the goods brought overland from India and China, it was a little offensive. They did not like the idea of having to grease the wheels, so to speak, to get those products. So this fella, Christopher Columbus, that we're celebrating today, sold the idea to the monarchy of Spain to equip him with some ships and let him give it a try. Now, some say that Christopher Columbus actually had some of those ancient Arab maps, which reportedly were copies of even more ancient Phoenician maps, and that he actually knew that he was sailing off to a previously unknown land across the Atlantic Ocean. And the discovery of a copy of the Paris map of 1531, kind of feeds a group out there who just want to see conspiracies in anything. They look at the Paris map, which was done up by a Turkish admiral in the mid 1500s, and they say that this map shows portions of Antarctica and places on the Earth that weren't really known until the early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century. In fact, the map makers of the day were doing the best they could. It's said that Paris used a variety of sources, including maps that were done by Christopher Columbus, and that he just wasn't really accurate in the southern tip of South America, and he had it, kind of curving in, and to those who are of a conspiracy bend, they see Antarctica in that. Well, maybe not. One of the surviving maps that was done by Christopher Columbus shows just how good the map-making skills of the early 1500s really were. These boys were doing some pretty marvelous work, all things considered. During that period in time, there was a significant technological leap, causing the world to shrink to a much smaller size. So, regardless of what you might think of Christopher Columbus, he was indeed a man of his times. But he didn't prove that the earth was round. The Greeks and the Romans knew that. Probably, 700-800 years before Christopher Columbus came along. The Phoenicians were more than likely trading with the Americas, particularly South America, on behalf of their clients in Egypt and Asia and Araby. Probably 5,000 years ago, certainly 3,000 years ago, maybe 4,000 years ago. Who knows? That goes back into prehistory. All we know for sure is that there are examples of 2,500 to 3,000-year-old mummies excavated out of Egypt that were obviously prodigious users of cocaine and tobacco, products that are only known to exist in the Americas. So, what was Christopher Columbus's big contribution? I mean, if he didn't discover the fact that the earth was round, if he was not the first to step foot in the Americas, what was he good for? Well, he was indeed a viceroy of the island of Hispaniola. We would know it today as Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And he also had interests in what we now know as Cuba. He was a mean son of a bitch who massacred the native populations and did not exactly endear himself to the Spanish colonists. Frankly, as time goes on, I think more and more of us are going to have a view of Christopher Columbus shared by other Americans. Guess we'll just have to wait and see. But in any case, for those of you who are celebrating Happy Columbus Day or Happy Native American Day or Happy Discovery Day, however you choose to celebrate it, enjoy. Did y'all hear about the EBT cards going bad? Huh? It's been in alternative media. It hasn't really been reported much on what passes for mainstream media, but there might have been a couple little quick mentions here and there. Alternative media is making a lot of it, and I don't want to be a divisive voice in this, but unfortunately, there is some opposition even within what's loosely referred to as the patriot community or the truth community or whatever you want to call yourself. I'm open to suggestions at this point. Some say, those lazy SOBs on food stamps, they got what they deserved. Ha 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 ha. Good. I shouldn't have to be paying for them to eat. Okay? Others in the community saw it as just another example of the Obama administration doing everything it can to make the current government shutdown as painful for as many individual Americans as possible. I look at it and I say, here we go again. They're getting that red team all set up against the blue team, and we're all going to put on our football helmets and our pads, and we're going to get out there and we're going to try and kick each other's ass, right? While the bankers and the politicians stand in the owner's box going, yay, yay. I don't care which team wins because no matter which team wins, I get paid. Okay? Now, just, what happened with the EBT cards? Well, J.P. Morgan. Yes, J.P. Morgan. Wall Street. Okay? J.P. Morgan runs what used to be called the food stamp program. Okay? And you betcha, they get a piece of the action on every dime. Don't kid yourself. But if you think they were actually going to do any work, no. They hired Xerox to do it. And, of course, the contract they got with Xerox, Xerox has to do this on the cheap. Well, here's the explanation. Xerox spokeswoman Karen Arena confirmed via email Saturday afternoon that some electronic benefits transfer systems are experiencing temporary connectivity issues. She said technical staff is addressing the issue and expects the system to be restored soon. Bottom line is, they're techno nerds. We're doing maintenance on the system that processes the EBT cards. Yeah. Okay. Now, have you ever been to a merchant, gone to swipe your credit card, and have it not be accepted? I have. We had a power outage. Matter of fact, I happened to be standing in Trader Joe's, waiting to check out, when the cash registers went out, the lights went out, the freezers went out, everything went out. All of a sudden, there was a power outage. Well, it can happen, Well, the manager of the Trader Joe's was smart enough that, buried deep in a pile of rubble in his little, cubby hole, he had one of those old-fashioned swiper machines. Remember those? Guys my age, you remember, used to have a machine. You ran a slide over the credit card, and it made an imprint on a piece of paper, and you wrote down the purchase, and the customer signed it. Remember when a contract required an ink signature? There was a time when if there was a credit card charge on your bill where the credit card company couldn't produce an ink signature, you could contest it. Try it now. Well, this manager at Trader Joe's, he got that one lousy machine they had and a stack of slips out, a couple of battery-powered calculators, and I'll tell you what, those cashiers, they were just, calculating up people's purchases, writing down the amount on the credit card. They were swiping the darn thing. They couldn't even call and verify that the credit card that people were using was good. But, at that point, the Trader Joe's people, they had, a store full of customers. They were going to take their money, process the business, and get them out the door. Nowadays, so few businesses even remember how to do it manually. If the computer system goes down, they're at an absolute loss. And that's what happened with the EBT system. The computer that processes the transactions for a few major metropolitan areas. The interesting thing is down in Texas, I understand Houston was out, Austin was running. Yeah, that's how localized these failures were. It's like they pinpointed certain areas. I don't know, being the Democrats are trying to punish the Republicans for digging their heels in on Obamacare. Probably picked Republican areas, left the Democratic areas alone. These guys play dirty that way. Could be. Who knows? Who is your average EBT recipient? A lot of people have this idea in their head that, these are, slack-jawed goof-offs that just don't want to work. It's easier for them just to take social services, A lot of the people that depend on what used to be called the food stamp program are working poor. Okay? It's just, the only work they can get is some menial minimum wage job. And by the time they pay their rent and their phone bill and keep the lights burning and buy a little bit of food, they don't have enough to make ends meet. So we do have this safety net. here in the United States, where they do get a subsidy, where, they get a little extra from the government. It's call it what you want, call it welfare, call it a handout. I don't care what you call it. Bottom line is, there are a lot of people in the United States right now who, if not for food stamps, them and their children would go hungry. Now, I know a lot of libertarians out there. Well, there are workhouses, aren't there? Perhaps they should just die and reduce the surplus population. Come on, get real, okay? What we're seeing here is the most vulnerable of our citizens being preyed upon. And you betcha, the day the lights go out and there's no way to process those EBT cards, and, those poor hungry people are trying to figure out who to blame for the fact that their kids are screaming for something to eat, those politicians in D.C. are going to point at you, and they're going to say, it was them patriots, terrorist attack. Yeah. Them terrorist patriots did it. It's probably those white folks up the road there that live in the nice homes and drive the fancy cars. It's their fault. They did it. Yep. They're going to find somebody to blame other than them. And right now, you be looking like a target of opportunity. So, this is how the game is played. They will pit those who are dependent on government services against those who, for whatever reason, call it dignity, call it honor, call it hard-headedness, whatever, those who refuse to accept a government handout, just on general principles. They will pit those two groups against each other as a means to divide and conquer. As long as you're busy fighting somebody else, you can't join together and face off against those who are really the enemy of all. Did I make my point? The United States of America has a long history of civil disobedience. Now, do you really think that you women out there got the right to vote because you asked nicely? You black people out there, do you really think that you achieved the objectives of the last 30 or 40 years with so many of you entering the middle class, some doing even better than that, because you asked nicely? All Americans should look back at the history of this nation and understand that, America was not formed because they asked the King of England nicely. Sometimes people have to stand up, risk it all, speak truth to power, and force a change. Now, there's a fella out there who, to be honest with you, I'm not real fond of, okay? Frankly, I think the guy's a grandstander. Yeah, I think he's, a media hound. Yeah, I think, but yeah. My opinion, and $5 get you one of those foofy coffees over at Starbucks, my opinion don't matter. there is a fella who took a stand back on July 4th. He tried to organize a march on Washington, D.C. to protest all the, ridiculous firearms laws that the government seems hell-bent on jamming down our throats. So call him a libertarian, call him a patriot, call him a gun rights activist, call him whatever you want. This fella has got brass cojones the size of melons, okay? He took the fight right to Mordor, stood right outside the all-seeing eye, loaded a shotgun, cocked it, and said, "See you next July 4th." Now, most would say what followed he brought on himself. And I guess you're entitled to that opinion. But the fact of the matter is, Adam Kokesh, right now, is a political prisoner. One of many in the United States of America. We think of political prisoners, and we think, oh, that's just something, them Arabs do. They lock folks up. Them tin-horn dictatorships in Africa, yeah, they hold political prisoners. And down in South America, those evil banana republics, they just lock folks up for their political views and throw away the key. Yeah, that wouldn't happen here in the United States of America. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave, right? Wake up and smell the coffee. Now, regardless of what you think of Adam Kokesh, regardless of what you think of his various campaigns, regardless of what you think of the specifics of his political philosophy, you should acknowledge the fact that this man is being incarcerated in a D.C. jail as a political prisoner. So what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Right now, I'm a little afraid to make financial contributions because there has been some squirrely stuff going on with the support organization that Adam Kokesh tried to found. He has this centralized scenario going on in his head where he hired a bunch of yes men to run his organization for him, and it appears that a couple of them stepped off the reservation once Adam was no longer there to keep a rein on him. I believe that most of that has settled down at this point, and that if you go to Adam versus the Man, Adam VSTHEMAN.org, AdamVersusTheMan.com, I think you'll find him. And I think if you can make a financial contribution to his legal defense fund, it would be appropriate. Now, I have said many times that, when the Ruby Ridge incident happened, I was shocked. I wondered, where is the outrage? How come people weren't pissed off by that? And then that thing in Waco happened. And I just knew there was going to be people in the street after that Waco thing. Nothing. Crickets. And then the Browns got arrested for tax evasion, and I said, okay, this is going to do it. This is going to galvanize America. We got the Browns been held for years as political prisoners for being tax protesters. They're still in prison. And they're old. They're older than I am. They're probably going to die in jail. Yeah. Now Adam Kokesh. Okay. Those of you who do not believe that the revolution has already started need to wake up and smell the coffee. They're coming after us one at a time, very quietly, very carefully. Okay? Just because they haven't yet come after you doesn't mean you're not a target. So what are we going to do? Well, I'll tell you what, much as those boys like their coffee and donuts, we ought to occupy all the Dunkin' Donuts. Maybe that's the way to get the message across. I'll tell you, this past week here in the Washington metropolitan area, been kind of exciting. Almost reminds me of the late 60s, early 70s, all the protests and all the activities that have been going on here in D.C. As I'm sure many of you are aware, this past weekend was the ride on Washington by the truck drivers. Now, here again, I don't care whether you agree with the truck drivers' agenda or disagree with the truck drivers' agenda. Now, basically what they're protesting is they're protesting the high gas prices, the ridiculous taxation. I mean, the costs associated with having to comply with Obamacare. I mean, basically, truck drivers at this stage are working for minimum wage or less. All right? This is not a joke to these people. They have been hurt badly. When you see a truck driver, understand something. It's that man, his truck, and the tax man. Okay? He's a small business person. All these independent drivers, the only source of their revenue is hauling loads from point A to point B with that truck. Every time gas goes up a little bit, they can't necessarily raise their cost, raise their price to their customer because, these fees are, they're set by, I know it sounds ridiculous, but, the fees are set by the customers. And basically, if the truck driver wants to work, he has to fall in line with whatever fees the customers have agreed to pay. I know it sounds ridiculous, but, when you're General Motors and you've got a whole bunch of cars to haul, you make a deal and you say, okay, we're going to hire out all of the hauling of the cars to XYZ Company. And XYZ Company subcontracts to independent truck drivers. And they will pay what General Motors is willing to pay to haul those cars. And that's it. Okay? So the truck drivers have absolutely no protection from the effects of rising costs. Their fuel's gone up. Their taxes have gone up. Costs them more for a meal at the diner on the road. All of their costs have gone up, and they cannot necessarily pass those cost increases on to their client until the next time the contract comes up for renewal. It's not a comfortable situation for the truckers. I think Obamacare probably was the straw that broke the camel's back because now, on top of everything else, they're going to have to pay for health insurance coverage that they don't particularly want and cannot afford. So yeah, the truckers rode on Washington. You're not going to see much reporting about it on the mainstream press. You'll hear a little blurb. Here around the Beltway in the Washington metropolitan area, we have gotten some reports on our local TV channels because basically it is it's a local phenomena. They did indeed clog up traffic pretty bad on Friday and Saturday. By Sunday, they were, doing donuts around the various monuments downtown. They were joined in their protest activities by a group of World War II veterans who were just absolutely incensed at finding barricades blocking them from open air memorials that had been dedicated in their honor. Some of these fellows had flown clear across the country, and these guys are in their 80s and 90s, some of them in wheelchairs. Okay? And this is their one shot during their lifetime to see the World War II or Korean War Memorial or perhaps the Vietnam War Memorial that was built to honor their sacrifice. They get here to Washington, D.C. and find out that the Park Service has put up barricades. Well, you tell a man who took on the Japanese at Iwo Jima that he cannot approach the monument to that effort in Arlington. If he stood up to the Japanese, he will stand up to some park policemen. Once again, it's becoming more and more clear that the entire focus of this so-called government shutdown is to shut down those government services that might just impact you. Whether you're a food stamp recipient, perhaps even a Social Security recipient, perhaps you've got a government or military pension. If you are dependent in any way on government, the current shutdown is intended to make you suffer. If you're an American who maybe just made plans for your vacation to see the sights in Washington or to see Mount Rushmore or to see Yellowstone Park and you just happen to choose this time of year, well, you're going to have to suffer too because, even though it's costing them more money to keep you out of those facilities than it would if they just open the doors and let you in, they don't care. The idea behind this government shutdown is to punish you for not being obedient little Obamacare slaves. Now, it is all just theater. It's a dog and pony show put on by the blue team versus the red team. Neither one of them is addressing the real issues. Neither one of them wants to address the wars. The military is still buying all the bombs and guns they can possibly desire. They're still waging war in God only knows how many nations around the world. They're still paying those government contractors to carry M16s in, or I guess they're M4s nowadays. They're still paying contractors to carry weapons in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're buying Italian cargo planes as fast as they can get them, then parking them in the desert as mothballed equipment that they don't really have a use for. You still can't go through an airport without either getting irradiated or sexually harassed. The NSA is still spying on you. I guarantee you, they're watching this recording right now. Not because they really care, but they're trying to see if maybe, I'm threatening somebody or doing something, terroristic. So yeah, when there's a government shutdown, the idea is to shut down those services that are important to the majority of people. But that small minority who have become fabulously wealthy off of government largesse will continue to become fabulously wealthy because you, Mr. American, have the very best government money can buy. Problem is, you thought you were the paymaster. Wake up and smell the coffee. Well, I think that's about it for me barking at the moon this October 14th, 2013, Columbus Day. So I think I'm going to sign off. And yeah, for those of you out there who I disappointed last week, frankly, I was beat. I had a very large project come up. Couldn't avoid it. So I did not do my Monday program last week, did not do my Thursday program last week. It was just, taking care of business. No, I was not arrested. No, the guys in the black Suburban did not beat me up because the donuts were stale. It was just one of those things. Paying the bills had to get in the way. But that's going to be it for me tonight. But I will see you next week. Y'all take care now.
Calling out to you. Won't you turn, won't you turn?